Welcome back, everybody. My name is Mark, and today we're actually going to use Liberty Basic or just Basic to go ahead and parse some XML. I like using Basic every now and then. I know how to use C++ and C Sharp, but sometimes you want to use just kind of an easier language so it takes a little less brain power and you can just enjoy messing around. One of the things I've had to do recently is I wanted to be able to read from a database file, so XML is a great source for a database. So I've created my XML. I've used Notepad++ to do that, and right now would probably be a good spot to pause the video and go ahead and make your XML file. We have a list of daggers. Each dagger has an ID, a name, and a weight. I've only have 3 here, and I've saved that as a .xml. Now I've created a folder on my desktop. I've saved my XML file in there. I'm also going to save my solution file, my .bas, my Liberty Basic or Just Basic file, into that same folder. So now that you've unpaused the video and you're going to continue, let's go ahead and minimize the XML. So now I'm going to do apostrophe here, and I'm going to do a little, just make a remark. So I'm going to call it Parse XML. I'm not going to explain everything. I'll do a quick explanation of stuff, but for the most part, I'm kind of assuming you know what you're doing with code. You've kind of taken a few tutorials. You've kind of been playing around with BASIC. You know what an array is, but I will just kind of break things down a little simply as I go on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to declare our array. First, I'm going to make a remark about it. And this is just notes for later on. Say we don't work on this for a couple months, come back, we're like, what were we doing here? Oh, now I know. So basically, this is what our array is actually doing for us. It's listing everything out with a row. Each row is going to have an ID, a name, and a weight. Now we're going to declare the array. In BASIC, it's dim. And then I'm going to say items. And as we can see by the $sign, it's going to be a string array. So it's going to be 100 rows with 3 columns. And then we need some counters. So we need an ID counter. We're going to set it to 1. We need a name counter. Set that to 1. And then we need a weight counter. We'll set that to 1. We need all those for our loops that we're going to do. So as we're adding to the array, we need these counters to go ahead and loop through how many times we need to. So say we had 10 attributes we needed to read from each cell in our XML. Say a dagger had 6 attributes, 10 attributes, we'd have to have that many counters. You'll see why. And then we're going to have another local string variable of ID. This is just going to let us look up a specific ID. We'll set it to 1 for now, but we'll play around with that a little bit later. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to need to open our XML file and read it into our program. So we're going to say open. Now it's going to be test.xml. Now remember, I saved this in that folder where I saved my solution file. If we had a folder inside our solution file, say it was an XML folder, we do XML, and then that would navigate to the default directory and look in the XML folder in that directory and look for test.xml. But since we don't have that, we're just going to look for test.xml. And then from here, we're actually going to say for input as, and this is the handle XML once I type tonight. Then we're going to have we'll read it into a string variable, my XML, and we're going to say for input, and then we're going to pass in the handle, and then we're going to say length of file. Man, I cannot type tonight at all. And then we're going to pass in XML. And then now that we've read it into our string variable, we can go ahead and close it. So there, now we've read it into the variable myXML. Now that we've read it into that variable, we want to actually set that string to uppercase. We're going to do that with another variable called parse, which is another string variable, and we're going to upper my as XML. I'm going to set that to uppercase. So now that whole thing's uppercase. And then we're going to go ahead and find the tag position. That's going to be an instruction. What we're going to do is find out the number of where the tag is. To do this, we're going to pass in parse. That's what we're looking for. And the tag we're actually looking for is the ID tag. So we're looking for those 4 characters. That's actually gonna, and you'll see I got a little typo here, so we want to make sure, there we go, tag position. So now what happens is tag position gets assigned the number where it finds this first character. So this lesson, it's going to find this whole thing and return the first character, what position it starts at, which I think it's like 65. What that allows us to do is set up a while loop. So we're going to say while tag position is greater than 0, so it's going to keep looping. And then common practice is I always end the loop while when. And so now what I can do is figure out what we need in our loop. What we need is we need to find the end position. And so we're going to use another instruction. And we're passing in parse. And then the end position we're looking for is actually the closing tag. And we're going to start looking for that at the tag position. So that's what we're passing here. So here we're passing in the uppercase string variable. So we're saying look in this string, and then we're saying look for this tag right here, the closing tag. And then we're saying start looking at tag position. Because we don't need to actually read the whole file, we can just start reading from the tag position. Makes it just a little more efficient. Once we find that position, and then we want to go ahead and get our tag. So we want to extract the information out for us. So here we're extracting out the ID, the numbers 001, 002, 003, the item IDs. To do that, we're going to use mid, and then we're actually going to pass in my XML, and then we're going to say tag position. We're going to say +4, because we don't want to get the greater than I and D, the less than I and D, and the greater than. We don't want this whole tag. We want the information that's after the greater than but before the closing tag. So that's, we're setting the tag position, and then what we need to do is the end position minus the tag position minus 4. And we could have spaces, we don't need spaces. So basically, this is going to, between the greater than and the closing tag, this is going to grab the information. That's what tag is being assigned. Once we have that information, we would then want to go ahead and assign it to the array. So this is where we go items and ID count. Here's our counter that we declared before. We want to set this to the first column. So it's the first row, first column in our array tag. So since we have 3 of them, it's going to be the first column, but ID count's going to increment each time. So first row, first column, second row, first column. You know, so it's going to go right down the line for us. Then we want to increment our counter. ID count +1, and then we want it to count down, so we're going to say tag position equals pass in parse, and then we want to say end position. And what this will do is this will let our loop actually count down, and we can comment here. So it needed to exit loop. So basically this is all the information we need to actually extract out the ID out of our XML file. So if I were to hit end here, I don't want to do uppercase, but it wouldn't matter if I did, but I'll type end here, that says the end of the file. So if we were to run this, we wouldn't see anything, but we want to make sure we're actually getting the data out of the XML file. So let's go ahead and print it in a nice format. So first I'll do another comment, just so just a little code, a little comment here. And then we're going to say print. We'll do a semicolon, we'll keep these all in the same line. We're going to use a tab command. This will give us a little spacing for us. If some of this doesn't make sense, use the help file for Liberty or Just Basic. I mean, it's going to give you a lot of information. Or, you know, send me a message and I'll answer it the best I can. This works very well. And now we're going to have a loop. So we're going to say for I equals 1, 2. Remember, it's ID count. We'll say -1. Then we're going to print items. This is our array. And we're going to say I and 1 because we want whatever row it is and then the first column. Then we can say next. We could just say next or next I for better clarification. So as long as we didn't make any mistakes in typing, which hopefully we didn't, and we save this in the same folder where our XML file is, we go ahead and run it, we'll see all the IDs are printed out. So there's item ID 1, 2, and 3. Now we know we have 3 IDs in there, so that's what's showing up. If we had 10 IDs, those would show up, 20 IDs. Now that we've got all 3 IDs in there, let's go ahead and see if we can print out the names of each item. What we can do is actually copy and paste this code because it's identical except for a few changes. So we're no longer looking for ID, we're actually looking for name. And so let's go ahead and change both those, top and bottom here. So there's name. Then name actually has 6 characters from the less into the greater than. So instead of +4, we want +6 and -6. That way we know how much to trim off there properly. And now remember, we're no longer in the first column, we're in the second column. So when we set the count, we want to set it to 2. But this count, we actually want to change it to name count. Because it's no longer ID count, it's name count. And then we want to increment the name count. So there we go. So here, name count, second column. Here's all the name counts. Now, as of right now, if we were to run it, we wouldn't see anything. We want to add another little piece of code. We're going to use a comma. And then we're just going to say items. It's going to be I. And then we're going to put 2. That's the second column. So now that we've made all those changes, we go ahead and run this. We'll see, okay, now we have the item IDs. Now we have the item names right here. Now all we need to do is do it for weight. It's going to be the same way. We're just going to copy. And then we're going to change it. So I'm going to change name to weight. And this is all uppercase. When copying and pasting, you need to make sure you change everything. Alright, so they're going to have 8 characters. So +8 -8. So we trim it properly. And then we're no longer on name count, we're on weight count. And this is the third column. Control C, just copy and paste it here, save some time. So now we've changed weight, we've changed that it's 8 characters, we've changed the counter to weight count, changed the column, weight count, and now we just want to go ahead and print that column out. So items I then 3. So now we'll save it and run it. Here we go. We have the IDs, the names, and then the weights of each item. So that's pretty cool. We can print everything out. So okay, we've read it all. Well, what does that mean? Well, say we wanted to find the specific name of an item and then assign it to a variable, say we're making an RPG game, and say that item had a bonus or, had a negative effect, we could then read it into our variable and have the negative effect affect the player in the game. So to do that, we'll do a little code here. So we'll do a comment. So we're going to print a specific item's name. So that's what we're going to do. So it's going to be another for loop. So for x equals 1, 2. We can use ID count again. ID count minus 1. And then we'll say if Thames, we want items. Because now we want to read the ID. So here we're going to say x1, because we're reading the first column in every row for the ID. And then we want to say if it's equal to, now remember that variable that we created but we didn't do anything here, ID 001. So this is where if it's equal to ID, then we want to print items x, we'll say 2, that's where the name is, and then we want to just loop around. So next. So now that's going to print out the first item's ID. So we'll save it and run it. So ID 001, its name is dagger plus 4 fire. Here we see dagger plus 4 fire. Now what we could do is go up here, let's change it to 3, dagger plus 3 might. So ID 3 is dagger plus 3 might. We see we print it out. So just by doing that little bit of code, we can actually go ahead and assign variables or assign bonuses to other variables. We could have more code here that says, instead of printing it out, character weapon equals, dagger plus 4 fire, so in an RPG game that would give us an items database that we can read from. Just makes things a little easier, keeps data lumped together nicely. It's kind of a fun way to parse XML. It's not a very complicated file, but it just, if you haven't parsed any XML before, it's kind of tricky with BASIC. Something I learned and I thought I'd share. Any questions, please leave them in the comment section, and I'll definitely get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching.